You know, I found that the more common and everyday normal an item or an accessory is, the less we pay attention to it. Not necessarily what it is, but the details of it. I find that ropes fall into this category. So, with that in mind, let's talk about ropes. So, obviously, ropes are twisted and they are a braid. So, the most common ropes you're going to find are all made up of 3 cords, and they're just going to braid each other around and form these segments. Now, the thing that's important about these rope segments is that they're all angled. A lot of times, we're going to want to try and think of them as up and down, but they're not. They're all angled and they create a curved shape where it tapers up at the top and down at the bottom. Think of it like your typical squeezed out, picturesque toothpaste on a toothbrush. They're curved because they're showing this illusion of wrapping around and going around back to front, all braided together. So let's talk about it though in rotation, because obviously we're not ever going to see rope all the time in one angle. It's going to move. So we're going to have to find obviously our segments, and we're going to have to find our angles. Now the thing though is that at the ends, because these segments are thicker and rounder, they're going to stack on top of each other, and they're going to contour and overlap each other, and the ends are really going to kind of look like the end of a rattlesnake tail, whereas you're still going to find that toothpaste shape throughout the middle. Now, fraying, it's important to remember the 3 strands, because that's going to help dictate the shape of the fray, and the amount of fray you want and how separated you want those 3 strands to be. That's entirely up to you based on how distressed and how snapped this rope is. But it's good to remember that it still has those 3 strands, so when they unravel, you can have your strands flare outward and shape in somewhat of a triangle, and then just vary the length and fray it up so that you have something that definitely looks more like frayed rope and not just a cutoff that you don't really know what was underneath. Now, you can't really talk about rope without talking about some knots, because that's where you're going to find it most commonly. And the really important thing about knots is that you have to remember how thick your rope is, because you're going to have a uniform thickness, generally speaking, throughout your rope. It's not going to waver as much as some other items, like the vines, for example. So whenever you're doing your knots, make sure you're defining your overlaps. You need to make sure that they're going to overlap in a way that's alternating, so that it actually looks like the pieces of the rope will be coming together, and when they're pulled taut, they will knot up together. Now, the best way to learn how to do this, well, practice. Start doing some loops and looping that rope all around and alternating the areas where you're going to have your overlaps, because that's going to, once you flesh it out, you're going to be able to follow it and think, oh, that actually doesn't make a knot, or that does make a knot. And so it's really just something that boils down to practice. Now, when you're wrapping your rope around the object, the thickness is also still very important, especially around the edges of whatever it is wrapped around. The thing that is also really good to note is the contour of whatever the rope is going to be wrapped around underneath it. So follow that contour, make sure you're drawing through so that you can get the full shape, and then drawing all of your segment lines and having those segment lines follow the contour appropriately. But you want to remember that objects in real life have depth, so remember the thickness and remember that depth. So thank you guys for watching. Go check out my school for art hack guide downloads, and with that, go practice. Thanks, everybody.